Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stories Worth Hearing, where I get to interview women who are on a mission to create. Hi, I'm Denise Hantard, your host and your life architect. And today I've got somebody really special with me, Mary Volmer, whom I want to just tell you a little bit about her. So Mary wears a lot of different hats in her life. She's a mother, she's a spouse, she is a teacher, she's a coach, she's written many, many articles for different publications, and she also has 2 published novels under her belt. Woohoo, I love that. It's Crown of Dust and Reliance, Illinois. Now, I haven't read either one of those, and they're on my list to read because I've read about them and I know they're going to be wonderful stories as they are. I came to know Mary through deciding to write my own novel. And I knew in writing I needed a coach, and Mary is one of those coaches. It's through the Sellable Novel program. So if you're looking for any program, if you want to write, that's the one to go to. And I can remember the words that Mary said to me one day. She looked at me and she went, "Denise, don't be afraid to go dark." And I did. And I love those words. Mary, as a young girl growing up in California, and she'll tell you about that, but she had dreams, and they were some pretty wonderful dreams. And so let's welcome Mary on. Mary, welcome, welcome. Thanks for being on today.
Denise, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Definitely. So I want to hear about what those dreams were of you as a child, and tell me your journey, because you've had a journey through it all.
Yeah, my early dreams were all in the athletic arena. I loved to compete. I loved to play and to sweat. My first sport was probably tree climbing, which had no audience at all, but how high could you go? How high dare you go? Was my favorite thing. And then the view from up there, of course. But when I was a teenager, I put all of my passion into basketball. And I loved the game. I loved the pace of the game. I loved the unpredictability, moment to moment, what the game was going to do and offer. I loved the fact that you could play hours and acquire these skills, some of them fairly useless skills, spinning a ball on your finger. You're never going to do that. But the project of training your body to be able to do these things was such a pleasure. And competing was almost secondary to me, to the daily practice that the sport represented. And I recognized that I liked to work. I wasn't working necessarily to outwork someone else, but to just see how far I could go. And it turned out that I was very fortunate to play with some coaches who recognized my ability, and I was able to get a scholarship to play at St. Mary's College of California. Go Gales! I'm still quite a loyal fan. And when I was there, I came up against the limits of my ability. So there is a point after which effort does not necessarily breed success, not in the way that we're taught to admire success, the top of the podium, the top of the tree, right? Mm-hmm. I had to reconsider what it was I wanted out of the game and what it was that mattered to me. And I had to re-embrace the practice of the game, because I wasn't going to be a superstar at the college level, no matter how hard I tried. And eventually, I was free from that and able to just play and be a teammate and to get better, but without the notion that achievement was the only way of measuring worth in a practice. Now I should back up and say that during the same time, while I'm playing basketball, while I'm sweating in the gym and on the field, I'm discovering books and I'm discovering writers. And I'm recognizing that there's a certain kinetic movement too of the mind across the page with these authors that I loved. First and foremost was Toni Morrison, whose language seemed to defy all notions that I had of, an absolute and correct grammar, which was stale. Suddenly the language was hopping off the page, bouncing, if you will, with a kind of artistic flavor that I saw on the court.
Yeah.
And so probably when I was 13 or 14, I started journaling and scribbling terrible poems, hundreds and hundreds of terrible poems that nobody saw but my mother, who claimed to love them.
Gotta love mothers.
Without mom, I don't know. She was the one who bought me those basketball shoes too. And then all the way into college too, I had been reading. And I remember getting into college and one of my teammates saying, "You mean you read for pleasure?" Like you're done with your homework, but you're reading? What is that? And sometimes you discover your oddities after the fact, after they've already been well established. So in college, here I am, I'm riding a pine. I'm getting junk time at the end of a game. If there's 30 seconds left and we're up by 10, I'm going to get in the game, but there's nowhere else for that kind of passion to go. Where does it go? And so I started writing in earnest, and I started putting forth some of that passion and energy that I had always funneled into sports, into study and into books. And in that arena, while I may not be the tallest or the fastest, it's the voice that matters, and every individual voice that matters. And it's not a competitive, it is in the marketplace, but in terms of who's allowed to practice, there was no coach that was going to say, you can't write today. you're benched. So what I did is I started writing about basketball, and I published a series of articles with Full Court Press magazine. It was my first paid writing gig. And from there, I started applying to writing programs, telling no one that I was a writer. I would have never said I was a writer. And I got into...
Was that even your parents? Did you tell your parents?
Yes. No, because they thought I would go. I went away to the University of Wales on a Rotary Scholarship, and I was going to write. And I think they probably figured it would be out of my system. By the time I returned, I would do the practical thing and get the teaching credential, and get the respectable job. Yeah, I am a teacher. I absolutely am a teacher.
Yeah.
But not at the high school level, not at the public school level, which is where my whole family teaches.
Yes.
I'm from everybody is in the school system in some way. I don't know, where was I? I was all over the place, but I'm discovering.
You were being paid, but you were being a paid writer, basically, an author for publications, but you weren't telling anyone.
No. And I continued to write. And when I went over to the University of Wales in Aberystwyth, I studied writing.
Yeah.
And it became very clear there that I had more talent than I had known that I had. And I had a tutor there named Patricia Denker, a writer who recognized this and spent time with me, like as a coach would, and sent my early manuscript off to her agent who took it. So there were some leaps of luck and guardian angels along the way that kind of pushed me in the direction that I had never chosen. I would never have told you, even as a sophomore in college, that I was going to be a writer. But sometimes your vocations choose you, and they ask of you what you need to become, and you can say yes or no. And I tried not to. For the publication of the first book, I thought, well, I'll just keep publishing books. It's a lot harder than I thought. That first novel came to me,
Was that Crowns of Dusk?
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah. So the first novel, Crown of Dust,
Crown of Dusk?
that's this one. That came when I was 5,000 miles away from home in Wales. And as I was looking back on California history, while I was living among the standing stones and living history of Britain, I became very enthusiastic and fascinated by California history and about gold rush history, particularly that moment when young people like myself, mostly men, were stranded by their own choice, of course, months away from all the institutions that had grown them up. And they were drawn by this notion of gold and reinvention, this myth, both of them mostly. But I recognized in their longing and in their desire for these things, my own journey to Wales. And so when I could find in their story my own and tell it sideways, I found the story. The story you're telling, even if it seems very different from your own reality, if told well, it's because there's a part of you that's integral to that telling, to that story.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So you feel like the first one, you're giving yourself the luck factor of just saying, happen to be in the right place with the right person at the right time.
And I was ready. You have to have something. You have to be ready when the right person and the right time comes.
Exactly. And you had the discipline to apply that passion. Because when you saw, as you said, your limitations in basketball, okay, you reinvigorated the passion you had for books, and you began to have that voice, and you followed that dream with it. So it was that discipline, because how many people have you heard, as we all know, that say, oh, I've got a book inside of me, I've got to write this book, I just know it's going to be a great bestseller and everything like that. And not many of us follow that, whatever it is, whatever our passion is.
Yeah. And I think basketball taught me that, but more than discipline, what basketball taught me was how to lose myself in a moment of focus. How to lose and how to extend that moment. When you step on a court for practice or a game, nothing exists outside the court for that period of time. And it's a splendid moment of focus, even if it's hard, even if it's painful, it's all consuming. And so I think what I had learned from sports, even more than the discipline, was how to find that moment and how to invest myself in it. And when I'm writing well, I know, because I'm not as aware of time on the same way that I'm aware of time in every other moment.
I love that.
And there's a certain full body experience. It's almost kinetic. It's almost like playing a sport. When I'm in the work, it's not always going well. I mean, even if you're in the game, you might be losing it. But there's a certain level of engagement that is a joy, no matter what's happening on the page or on the court.
Love that.
And it's almost a spiritual, the contemplative level that you achieve, and is also what I continue to hunger for when I'm teaching or on the court or on the page.
Love it. Love it. Then you went on and you wrote Reliance, Illinois. Now, two historical.
That took a lot longer. That book, the seeds of that book were born from the seeds of this one. A lot of the research I had done in the 19th century, I had no place for. I had some really interesting personalities that had no place in this book. And yet it took me 10 years, probably all told, to write this second book. And in part, I was fighting myself. I was thinking that now that I had written a book, I therefore must know how to write books. But that wasn't true. I had learned how to write that book. and it was, and at the time I was a graduate student. I was couch surfing. I wasn't married. I had no child. I wasn't doing any jobs that demanded any kind of real thought and rigor. And so it was a very different moment in my life when I was sitting down to write the second book. In both instances, however, there was a moment, and probably several over the course of the writing, when I just surrendered to everything I didn't know and everything I couldn't see, and asked the story, what do you want of me?
You know what, I think that's our biggest moments, is when we're able to surrender to what we're being called to.
Yeah.
Because when we do surrender, then it just, total surrender. We fall into that place of allowance and genius that's within us. And the story just tells itself. Your characters jump into your body basically and start writing the story.
And it's, it is more laborious than that. There's, I always think there's going to be this turning point in which everything's just going to come. And it might happen on a day, but the next day it won't.
Exactly.
And I still have to spend the time. And it's a kind of faith, not necessarily in yourself, although that's part of it, but in the story. And I think we are given stories. Some people are given one, some people are given many to tell. And the burden comes in your inability to tell that story in the moment that you receive it. But over time and over days and discipline and opening, a constant listening and a mastering of the craft, right? It's all well and good to know how to watch people shoot 3-pointers. But if you don't shoot 10,000 of them, your chances of making them in the game are slim. So
was there ever a time when you just said, screw this, I'm dead, forget this book, the second book, or the third one you're writing now, which I know you're on your third book?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Many times. I've tried to quit. I'm just not very good at it. I've tried. And yet, I love to read. And every time I read something, my whole body, my soul comes out and says, I want to do this. I want to make someone feel like I just felt reading that book. I want to be able to see the world in a way that allows someone else to see the world like that. And I'm constantly scribbling in a notebook. I've tried to quit. And now I've stopped trying to quit. Now I've come to the point where I realize this is just a part of who you are. It's not as though I'm going to change my eye color tomorrow, or make myself taller or shorter. This is just part of who you are. And you were going to do it. So all of my worry about the gift, whatever it is, being gone tomorrow, I just gave that up. I gave that kind of worry up. And also the worry that accompanies comparison and envy. I will never be Elizabeth Strout. And I love Elizabeth Strout. I'm glad that there's no one else like her. But for a while, I was so intent on emulating my heroes that I lost my own voice. I was crushed under the brilliance of others. And you're never going to find your own voice until you really honor and listen to it. As humble as it might be. You don't know. You don't get to decide, the measure of your own voice. You just have to listen to it and refine it. And that's a lifetime of devotion, independent of what your day job might be. And it's a freeing kind of devotion because it's independent of what anyone else says about it. When I give a poem to somebody, it's like, here's some bread. They may not even taste it. They're just, or it might be exactly what they need at that moment to nourish them. And if I approach it like that, big if, because I have days.
I love that wisdom. And it is about each choice that you have in every moment on if you approach it and allowing yourself to receive that. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. So what motivates you, or what motivation do you want to leave with others? What words of inspiration, et cetera, and everything like that.
I mean, if you must write, if you must create, then it's not a flippant. It's not an what's the word? Self-serving, selfish endeavor. There are selfish endeavors in the world. Making art is not one of them, especially if you're making it from a place of devotion. It's not that has to live through you, but is not about you. And trust that instinct. Trust that your voice matters, but also that it's not the only voice that matters. And that it's all the rivers, Jean Rees talks about all the rivers and all the streams feeding the rivers going to the ocean. All of those are necessary to feed the ocean. You may be a tiny trickle, but you are still feeding the larger human impulse to create, which is a divine impulse.
Mary.
I don't know if that helps, but
it does. I mean, that alone inspires me and keeps me grounded, which is why I joined the Sellable Novel Program, because of the two of you, definitely. So everyone, thank you, Mary. This has been absolutely wonderful. I think we could probably talk for hours, and we got to keep it a little short today. Another time
pleasure.
We'll have
Thank
back
you.
on. Yeah. So everyone, you can reach out to Mary. You can find her, probably just Google MaryVolmer, and that's her website, maryvolmer.com. I'll have it below in the description. Read her books, Crown of Dust, Reliance, Illinois. You could tell, yes, thank you. I mean, just by using the words that you use more, Mary, and telling your stories, the bouncing and everything like that. She's an author, she's a writer, she has this joy and this passion about it. So please follow Mary. Again, thank you, Mary, for this. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And guys, thank you for coming on and listening to Stories Worth Hearing. This is where we get to hear women who are on a mission to create. Please share this out. Please like, please subscribe. And until next time, thanks a lot.